let's move to another UFO whistleblower story, and that is in the form of a new documentary that is going to be coming out soon. It's in various theaters in the UK right now, but it's a documentary called Capel Green, and it features a gentleman named Larry Warren, who we are going to dig into deep in the next, I don't know, however long this takes us. But Larry is quote unquote the first whistleblower to come forward from the Rendlesham Forest incident of 1980. We won't go into detail. 3 consecutive nights in December of 1980, things happened in a forest called Rendlesham Forest, which was between 2 joint military bases, RAF Woodbridge and Bentwaters. And allegedly, a craft landed in the middle of the forest, and over 60 military personnel were witness to this. Several have gone on to say that they touched the actual craft. Others said that things were tracked on radar. There are actual audio tapes recorded by the deputy base commander at the time, Colonel Charles Halt. You can hear those audio tapes. I don't have them on me right now, but they are really unsettling when you listen to those things and you hear in real time what the colonel and his men are seeing happen. And what they basically are describing is this elliptical looking thing in the sky that was almost blinking. It looked like a big eye. And at one point, it was piercing laser precision beams down to the ground. And we would later discover that those beams were going towards nuclear bunkers. We were housing nuclear weapons on the bases at the time, which we were not supposed to be doing. It was completely against treaty, but the US had snuck nuclear ordnance into England as they were working these joint military exercises, just in case, height of the Cold War, got to be ready for anything. But this was all done under the shadows, and then this UFO event happened. Crazy stuff. A little bit more setup. A book was written called Left at East Gate. It became an instant British bestseller. It was co-authored by Peter Robbins, who many of you know is my mentor in the UFO field, UFO researcher, and he co-authored it with this man you see on your screen, Larry Warren, the quote-unquote first whistleblower of this event, who, as a security airman at the time, says that he was a part of this. That has changed and morphed throughout the years, but that's kind of my really butchered version of all of this, Suzanne. But what is your familiarity with the 1980 Rendlesham incident, if any?
I'll tell a funny story on myself. As a girl, or as probably a teenager, I was up late and watched this show on a UFO that had appeared over a forest in England. And it was maybe a 30-minute show at the time. And the next morning, I was telling my mom and dad and siblings about this show that I saw and how interesting it was and a little bit scary. And this was the premise of it. And there were all these military guys, and that I couldn't wait for the next episode, but I didn't know what the show was. That I'll date myself here. You had to have a TV guide at the time, the old magazine, the TV guide, to figure out what, if you missed the front end of a show, what a show was and when it would be on again. And it took forever. It took weeks for me to figure out this wasn't a TV show. This was a retelling of the Rendlesham Forest incident. And so it's my second favorite one. And my first one being aerial school. But this one, because there are so many trained observers involved and telling their truth about it. So that's my involvement with Rendlesham. I've probably the longest known UFO story for me.
Okay. All right. Now, what I think I'm going to do here is the reason we're really talking about this is because Ross Coulthart, who will come up twice in tonight's episode, Ross Coulthart did an interview with Larry Warren, another gentleman named Steve Longaro, and the director of the film Capel Green. I don't have his name with me. I do apologize.
I'm terrible at that.
Oh my gosh. Yes. But they went on with Ross to talk about the new documentary, and it was anything but. This became an hour, 2 hour long conversation of Larry Warren just like going off it was a train wreck, the interview, in my personal opinion.
I agree.
There were times where Ross Coulthart literally said, I need you to stop and just tell me what the F you saw out there.
Deion Johnson, Ryan. Deion Johnson's the
Deion
director.
Johnson. Thank you. And the reason there's a lot of controversy behind Larry Warren, the quote unquote original whistleblower, is for reasons we're going to get to in a minute. What I want to do now is play an extremely rare home video that was made by a group. They were called the East Midlands UFO Research Association. And they shot this video in March of 1994, which is 2 years prior to Larry Warren and Peter Robbins publishing their book on the event. And this was back when Peter and Larry were just starting to kind of get to know each other and work together on their book. And they had a very good, trusting relationship going into this book. So I want to play that for you right now. And this is Larry Warren back then in 1994 describing Capel Green, which is this new documentary, describing the area, Capel Green, and what he saw, what he experienced out there, allegedly. So let's go ahead and play that. It's a little long, guys, so please bear with us, but I do think it's worth it as we move through this story. So yeah, let's go ahead and watch this clip from 1994, where we'll see a young Peter Robbins and an even younger Larry Warren. Check this out.
To the logging road that we've walked in on, to this area called Capel Green, which was the site of the incident on the third night of incidents for RAF Bentwaters. You folks that are with us right now are the first English UFO researchers who have ever been walked into this area by an eyewitness who was involved in that night. With the exception of myself, our friends the Warnocks, to the best of our knowledge, no one has come back to this area with an awareness of where they were, what happened. Here we go, follow the man.
Well, the first thing that happened, this is the field. We came to this rise and I stopped right about here. There was security police all over the place. This tree was illuminated a yellow, and I used it as a marker that night. Off in the distance you'll see a farmer's house, and the light on the left second floor window was illuminated, and there was a white car parked there. You could see it. This thing illuminated everything. There was a circular... Peter, go to the dead center. You're going to bear to your... No, you're going to bear more left. Peter's heading right now to the approximate... Keep going. Stop. He is probably in dead center where this illuminated, transparent light on the ground. It was a foot in height. It wasn't hovering or anything. It was a circular thing, probably 50 feet across. It was self-illuminated. You could see through it at times. This field was all green grass, just like you see out there in December of 1980. And you could see through it at times. Right over here, Peter, walk to about where the cameras were set up. You want to come back this way, and you want to stop right there. These were there were Air Force or our base photo labs or public affairs cameras set up. One big motion picture camera and one small, well, at that time video technology was quite bulky, smaller video camera. There was a lot of personnel over in this area. The second fence was not here. We were told to move on into the field. Sergeant Bastinza and I stopped right about in this area. The first thing I noticed, that I watched the cameras shooting all the while. This mist object was a good 20 feet away from me. It was only this high off the ground. It was not hovering, and that's been misrepresented through the years. It was about this big, high, and we were watching it. There was a lot of security police from D-Flight. 2 English bobbies were right over here. Over in that way, some senior personnel started to move into the area from beyond that big log over there. If you see that tree turned down, that's where the senior officers started to come into the field. As we were watching this, there were disaster preparedness personnel out here with Geiger counters going in a almost half clockwise motion around this thing on the ground. The next thing I know, Sergeant Bustinza nudges me on the arm. I see the lights on in that house. I'm saying, Christ, somebody's watching this also. Still, again, you wouldn't have thought this was a flying... It wasn't. It was a solidified mist. That's all I can describe it as. Sergeant Bustinza knocked me on the arm, and 2 cows were walking. At this time, there had to be farm life here, farm animals. 2 cows walked up and were staring at this mist also on the ground. I never saw them again after this next event I described happened. We never saw them again. I can't say what happened. I used this tree as a marker. I think we've shown that. It was illuminated, and I said, I have to come back to this area. And sure enough, that tree is no different than it was. From that stand of center trees right there that crop out toward this field, I noticed a small red light over the top of them. It moved in. We thought it was an aircraft. I did, because the runway is just about 1.5 miles that way. And it moved in over the field in a downward arc so fast, stopped. It hovered about 20 feet off the ground. It was the size of a basketball, American basketball, self-illuminated, not quite red yet. That's the closest I can describe it. As soon as you could get a fix on it, this thing exploded. Light showered down where Peter is. This is how close I was to this event happening, and everyone else. Showered down on this object. I can't tell you how long that happened, but my eyes were flashed out. Some personnel ran right back over this rise into the brush, and a lot of us were left just standing here in shock. In the place of that mist was a solid, all I can say is solid, I didn't touch it, machine. It was about 30 feet across the base. It rose to about 25 feet in a sharp angle. It had delta appendages that came out of it. I can't tell for sure if there was landing gear or not. It was so low to the ground. No windows, no markings, no flag or country of origin, nothing. You could hardly look at it dead on. If you looked at it at the side of your peripheral vision, you'd get a shape of it. And there it was, clear as a bell. We could not move. At one point, through this event, which seems like a dream state at this point, if you can imagine, I couldn't, even thinking about it now, can't really comprehend the full dimensions of it. Myself, Sergeant Bustinza, one of the disaster preparedness gentlemen, and my shift commander moved in on this object. We were ordered to move in on it for whatever reason. I walked like this, clearly. And I'll use probably within this much distance. Say Peter is the front face of the object. Standing this close, we cast shadows upon it that went up at an angle. They had Geiger counters near it. We had to walk back and forth. We walked at this angle, and we had no armament, so there was no useful reason for this. And we walked back. There was a light that would come down on the shadows of our heads. Now, to cause a shadow effect on this object is strange because we couldn't get lighting equipment into this forest. None of them would work. But it was pulling our shadows. It's starting to rain, but the next thing that happened is that we went back to our position. Cameras are rolling all the while right over here. We went to a covered wagon, which is the whole object was surrounded by security police at intervals of about 10 feet between a man all the way around it. There was a lot of personnel out here. This light moved out from the side over here. I'll show you. And it moved like this. And it came around. It was one piece of light this wide. It was about this high off the ground. The light split into 3 individual, not round things, but almost cylinders of light. And then started to dim. Within the light, you could see clearly what looked like eyes, facial features, bright clothing, and some other device or something, but the legs and the lower extremities you really couldn't make out. It was almost translucent, a bluish gold light. This thing stood here, it floated here, it moved toward the front. There was a lot of activity, cameras flashing all the while, and I'm standing right there watching. I was about 25 feet away from all this activity. He was looking down. These things, mind you, were about this big physically. Off the ground still. There was no standing, no three-dimensional shape to them. About this point, I'm over here, and my boss, my shift commander, tapped us out. He was saying, return to the vehicles. We went back up over the rise, the way we came in exactly. headed back to the trucks, and now back in the parking area just after I left, we were seeing strange lights in the sky.
Okay.
Wow.
So, as an attorney, what are your thoughts on this guy's testimony?
Reading that body language, facial expression, he's telling the truth. He's telling what he saw. Truth becomes a problem for this particular witness later. So unfortunately, I know that. And so it does get in my head and keeps me from having what I would call a clean read. But he looks like he's telling the truth.
I would have to agree, actually. That came off to me as like genuine, and he was reliving it. Every detail. It was crazy, which can be a problem when something is too detailed as well.
Sure.
However, there was something about that footage there that I want to thank the East Midlands UFO Research Association. This was something I had never really seen before.
I've never seen it until now.
Yeah, and
but he
crazy
too is a
stuff.
trained observer, so the fact that you would see additional minute detail doesn't surprise me in the least.
Good point. Yeah, that's true. Now, the reason I wanted to show that is because let's fast forward some 80, 90 to some like almost 50 years later, where Larry Warren, who is featured in this new documentary, Capel Green, was interviewed by Ross Coulthard. And I'm just going to play the first clip.
Okay.
Again, I apologize. These are a little lengthy, but I want to get in as much information as we can. Here is Ross trying to get Larry Warren to describe what happened, because the reason this is kind of making news is because this was all said to have happened on the third night of events in Rendlesham Forest, and that it had happened in that basically this. How do I even explain this? This is the problem with the Rendlesham case. This was happening in conjunction with other events that were supposedly happening that night. Yet Larry Warren is the only one to ever come forward and describe these beings, this landed craft, that these beings were like entities that he saw, and that people were filming this and stuff like that, and the film was confiscated, this, that. Let's watch this clip.
Okay.
Because if anything, it's cringe, and it's Larry Warren as I know him, and as Peter knows him, and many others know him as well. So let's go ahead and find this for you guys here. Okay, here we go.
What you witnessed, please.
Let me just fill you in a little bit, Ross, because, God bless you, you've been able to avoid this thing for so many years. I am the whistleblower of these events. No one else is at all. I'm honored to have my brother Steve on there. We went through security forces training school together. He was the room next door to me. I'm honorably discharged veteran, just like my brother Steve's there. We were there to do a job. We didn't go to see flying saucers and all. Just a few things on what you said, and I'm not being rude to you, Ross. I'm just from New York, and we're pretty direct kind of people, like Australians, I find. Steve's from California. They do it in other ways. But the darndest thing is there is the first night with Peniston Burroughs, Ed Kavanasak, who they ignore, and Bud Steffens, I think, was on the relay. Had no knowledge of those events. The second night is a lieutenant named Bonnie Tamplin. The third night, you see, the thing is, the night halts out, a lot more happened. I never said Halt was in front of an alien anything. I did think I saw him in this clearing where we had the vehicles. We turned on our weapons to the Red Hats armorers. That was in the forest. Halt has been nothing, and I know he lost his wife. I have some humanity. I ain't going after no one. But this man slandered my not just him, by the way. The coffee clutch of ufology. They just jump on anything new. They don't do due diligence, don't look at anything. They read the insane ramblings of a woman from Leeds. But let me get back that they're on the third night, and there is only one third night, and that is the night that people were called out there to back up the original group. Halt was on a whole other side of that field. Myself, numerous others, not just me saying it. I mean, you got Sergeant Bustinza saying it. You have numerous others. You got Mike Verano saying it back 40 years ago.
Okay, can you
There was
stop
an
for a moment?
sure, there's
Can you stop
45
for a moment,
years.
Larry?
Sorry.
Because yeah, just stop for a moment, because what you're doing
Yeah.
is a kind of a word vomit, and I can understand your irritation at being accused of being
Yeah.
a fraud by Colonel Holt. But let's deal
Yeah.
with the specifics. So
Fair enough.
Colonel Holt claims that he went out on the evening, I think, of the evening of the 27th going into the 28th of December.
Correct.
And that's what he describes in his memo. And just so
Right.
our audience understands, so we don't get completely lost in the complexity, a night earlier, on the evening of the 26th into the 27th, as you say, Peniston, Cabansag, and John Burroughs had gone into the
Burroughs,
forest. And that is where they'd had the encounter with what Peniston describes as the craft, the landed craft.
Right.
And
that's a standalone account, by the way.
Right. And you're not saying that you were in that particular incident
No,
in the
not at
forest
all.
on
Not
the
at
evening.
all. No, never have. No.
Okay, so
No.
but are you saying that Colonel Holt is not being truthful when he says that he wasn't with you in the forest on the evening of the 27th into the 28th?
Right, Ross. Thanks. No, I'm not saying he's not truthful. He was not with me. I've never said he was with me. His party, a small party of men, were on the far side of this field, Capel Green, and went off into another field. What I describe, and others, this is the big crux of the Rendlesham thing they don't want you to know, which has been on record for years, is that there was an object on the ground in the middle of the field. It was filmed, photographed. Even British police were there. There were two of them. Cameras were taken. There was a ring of people. We were disarmed. Holt would have been aware of these events, and I would tell him. I've met him in person I knew him on the base. I met him in 93, I think, with another person I wrote my book with, which I shouldn't have. But I got the Holt memo out. I got the audio tape out. I gave it to CNN for no money. I'm the guy that did all that and named the witnesses, and that was 43 years ago. And I could tell.
Okay, Larry, I'm gonna rein you in, my friend. Yeah, you've got to stop whinging about being attacked.
And I like my ex-wife.
I want you to answer the question. Okay, so I want a clear witness statement that gives me a description of what you saw. It's really important because what you're describing is really important. It's a completely separate craft sighting and entity sighting.
Well,
there is completely separate.
Okay, forgive me, but I'll talk to anyone that swears as much as me. On the field was this triangular object. It was in the place of that mist. It was not on legs or I didn't see that as any kind of thing holding it up.
I want a nuts and bolts, full color, detailed description of what you saw on the ground. So please give me a full account right through to what you say included entities.
Well, I saw a triangular object that was about 20 feet across. It went up to a rounded kind of top. It had a reddish amber light at the top. It kept distorting and changing. It was snow white. It looks a little different in the movie. There were parts of it that it just didn't look aerodynamic. You didn't know what to think, and you weren't in the right kind of normal mindset like we are right now. And this being, thing, or whatever, I've never said alien, came off the surface of this object. It was
what do you see?
It was like a bubble. It depicted in Dion's film. The best way I can describe it is just a part of the fabric of that craft separated on the ground, 3 feet above the ground, or a foot off the ground. I mean, these things in it faded out, and there were 3 individual looking. In fact, Bastin's is the one that said, "Why are these kids here?" It just, everything was bizarre and it was there. And who else was there is, and to describe them, there was the big eyes, but it was like Ghost, okay? It looked like Ghost. It wasn't like Close Encounters, the little aliens come out and shake everyone's hands and off they go. It was very surreal and very surreal. Did it happen? 100%.
Okay, I need descriptions. So, are they humanoid creatures?
Oh yeah,
What color are they?
Well, geez, they were like ghosts. Picture Casper the Friendly Ghost, but not friendly. Facial features not really defined. Inside these lights, and you couldn't see the lower extremities very well.
Did they have arms? Did they have
oh
legs?
yeah, there were two arms, and it went down on. They were on the sides of these beings, things, non-humans.
Did they have hair,
Nope,
ears, nose?
no, nothing. It's the classic Communion. You ever see the book by Whitley Strieber, Communion? Of course, everyone's seen that cover. That face, that's what it was. It was one of those alien or non-human, because I don't say alien. They could be from Earth. I don't know.
So they had big black eyes. Was it? What were
They
the eyes
had
look like?
almond-shaped kind of, the classic wraparound kind of eyes. That was the most defining image of the face.
Okay. What'd you think of that?
I have issues with that.
Okay.
The first video, he tells us these things that came off the ship are cylindrical. Here we're using the term bubble. Different deal. I also hate that Ross, in trying to help, went into leading. And just for our viewers to understand, so if I ask Brian, do you ever use your calendar as a to-do list? In other words, you put, to call the plumber on the calendar. And what I'm asking Ryan is give me a question that's yes, no, or I don't know. That's a leading question. What I wish Ross, who's really good at this, by the way, I'm not saying this is a criticism, because normally he's quite good. And it is very hard, even for people trained to do it, with a frustrating witness like this who wants to go everywhere and you're trying to funnel them into a very specific place. It's very hard not to lean on leading questions. But if he had asked things like, what did their eyes look like? As opposed to, were their eyes black and almond shape, or however he said that. So I wish we had that. We could get a little more veracity testing on what he was saying when asked in a proper form. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of that. What do you make of that?
Well, and this is where I'm kind of heading with this conversation is there were discrepancies between what I showed from 1994 and today. Of course, like how many try recalling something from 30, 40 years ago and have everything be exactly the same. I get that. Like I totally understand.
Right.
But for me, it wasn't even that. It was the fact that like Larry spent most of this interview just being like, oh, screw the people who say I'm a liar and a fraud. Like, that's what they want you to hear. And
yeah,
I'm here to, I'm like, just tell us what you saw. If that's what you're here to talk about, tell us what you saw. And now he's saying that, and this is kind of the new revelation, that what he saw was a different craft from what everyone else saw, happening at the same time as other events that night with a craft. So while, Halt was like having his stuff go on, Larry was over in this Capel Green area in this open field, and there was like straight up like a meeting of military and aliens going on at Capel Green. It's just like, it's so much. And someone brought up in the chat, like, how much this story from all of the witnesses has evolved throughout the years, from like simple lights seen in a forest up to now two people touching the craft and one of them getting a download into their mind. And then now you got Larry saying that like this happened. You got other witnesses that said things happened weeks after that. Again, I'm not saying that none of this happened. I'm just saying, good Lord, what is it about this forest? And why can't any of these people get on the same page? And I think a lot of that has to do with egos. We see this all the time when it comes to UFO cases. It's
Right.
not just the researchers who have egos, it's the witnesses as well sometimes.
That's exactly right.
And I brought this up on Vetted with Patrick. I have a connection to all of this tangentially. Now, many may know, but many don't know. I met Peter Robbins. He became my mentor in the UFO field, the gentleman who co-authored the book with Larry. And I am a playwright. And I approached Peter and Larry and said, I want to write a play about your writing of your book, Left at Eastgate. And they loved it. So I spent 3 years interviewing Peter and Larry on different occasions. And everything was going great. Like, play was going well. I was so happy with it. I was doing a lot of research at the time, and this was really early on in my UFO research as well. The Rendlesham case is one of the ones that I really kind of went after, and that was because of Peter. And you know, a lot of people throughout the years said Larry Warren was never there. He's making all of this up. Nobody recalls him being there at all, and nobody can prove that either. This goes for Deputy Base Commander Charles Halt. This goes for John Burroughs, Jim Peniston, others that were involved as well. However, in this Ross Coulthard interview, I'm not going to play the clip because we're already going past the time I thought we would. Steve Longaro was another witness who was involved with an event that night. He says he just saw lights out in the woods at one point. But he's now saying that he did see Larry Warren there. Some 3, 4, 5 years ago, he told Peter Robbins, I want nothing to do with any of this, and I want nothing to do with Larry Warren. So what changed between then and now? I don't know. I can't pretend to know. The other big thing, and I am going to play this clip, is Peter Robbins and Larry Warren had a falling out to the point where basically their book was taken out of publication.
That's exactly right.
It was pulled.
And think about what has to happen, for our viewers to think what has to happen to take a book out of publication.
Yeah.
That is enormous.
And the reason for that is because it was found out that Larry Warren had, in fact, not been honest about a lot of things that had happened. This goes outside of the Rendlesham Forest incident. He had been caught doing, let's say, fraudulent things. I won't go into any further detail because I don't know a lot of the specifics. But basically, he had forged things. He had just basically made stuff up. I don't know how else to put it. This is not me saying that. I don't know that for a fact. These are the things that Peter found out personally, and other researchers found out as well.
And then made a huge decision that I'm sure impacted his life and his finances negatively to pull a book out of publication. So, if Peter Robbins is making those kinds of life decisions based on what has happened with this fellow, then I think we need to give it a lot of credence.
I think so. And I hope so, because, maybe I'm biased. Peter has always been a close friend and colleague and mentor of mine. So obviously I'm going to defend him in all of this. I will say that first clip of him and Peter at Capel Green is very convincing. And there's very little about how Larry Warren recounts this stuff that says that he's lying. However, Larry Warren is also an extremely charming person and can be somewhat manipulative. I mean, even going so far as to being like, Ross, I like you. You're a good guy. We totally get it. That's the kind of stuff a manipulator does to try to earn your trust. And when I heard the documentary filmmaker of Capel Green say, I've been close with Larry Warren for 8 years now, and we've become very close. Of course, I believe him. Guess who else said that for over 2 decades? My mentor, who eventually had a falling out and took their British best-selling book out of publication because he no longer believed his co-author's story. And that has affected Peter Robbins. And that does continue to affect him. Do you mind if I play this clip from my
Please do.
interview?
I think everyone needs to watch it so they can put all of this in the context in which we see it as well.
Okay, I appreciate it, and I hope you guys like it. Again, last clip will show, I promise. It's a little long, but I want you guys to see the impact this had on my mentor, Peter Robbins. The fact that he spent over 2 decades researching, investigating this case, working with this man, coming out with the book, and then eventually this all comes to light. I can't imagine it being easy.
It's a problem.
And yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and play this clip. Enjoy this, and then I promise we will close out the Larry Warren story for now, because I will be seeing the documentary, and I would like to interview Larry Warren at some point. More on that.
I would
after
like
the
to
clip.
help with that outline.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and watch
Need
this.
to work on that one.
That's going to be the longest outline we've ever had, for sure.
Scroll it.
Okay, let's find this here. All right. Do I have it? Okay, here we go. Here's me talking to Peter Robbins about Larry Warren, their falling out, and where he is today on all of this.
We came to New York the very following weekend, and
here we go.
Almost.
I did an extended recorded interview with him, which
Resolution
he
is
gave me permission
terrible.
to
Sorry,
publish.
guys.
And toward the end of Sunday, said, "I think you're the person I'd like to write a book with," and proposed what I considered fair terms, which was I be free to do this research in any manner that I wanted, and including if I could upturn his story, and he would be free to get his account, on the record. I thought it would take a year or two, but it did not. It took 9 years, a good part of which was not pleasant, but it was an important project to me. And when he approached me, I had been at that point of looking to get involved in my first book-length project. I assumed it was going to be on abduction, but this kind of tipped the scales. And what I was not prepared for in any sense, it's really not part of my character or makeup, although we learn to compensate for these things over time when we need to, was the simple fact that somebody had approached me with the intention of deceiving me on very certain key issues, with the intent of enrolling me in then helping him to deceive others, which is exactly what happened. So much of his account hung together well, and the few things that didn't quite make sense, I was able to rationalize or to chalk off to post-traumatic stress, which I don't now believe that he had, just drinking a lot early on. And we commenced our research. After 5 months or so, we went to England, which I felt was great. It was my second trip to England. I knew that we would look more serious as author researchers if we actually went back to the location, unaware at the time that in September, I think I was back in the UK for the 25th time or thereabouts. But we began our work in earnest. And that very first night on location in Suffolk, February 18th, 1988, within sight of RAF Bentwaters perimeters, we had our own multiple UFO sighting, which was the most shocking thing I had ever seen since I was 14 years old, quite simply. And in a way, as far as enrolling me in his story, in completing the book with him, etc., the best thing that could have ever happened to my co-author. It was a matter at that point of me to say, you either believe him or you don't. And you've just had a display of, this extraordinary activity right here on location. And so we continued over the years. when the book was finally published, it did no better or no worse than any UFO book in the States, but partly because of random timing. The book was published in the UK in June of 1997, the 50th anniversary of Roswell, the modern age of UFOs. The small press that published the book in the UK really went all out in every way that they could, with a very constrained budget, to bring the book to people's notice. And it was a smash bestseller all over the United Kingdom, resulting in like a 13-city, 1-month book tour. One of the great experiences of my life. And for years after the fact, the book stood at a point of respect and continued to bring to me people I would have never met otherwise, opportunities to speak in locations I would have probably never visited, and a certain amount of respect that I would have not garnered had I not stuck with this project for so long. Unfortunately, it all started to really unwind in 2016 and 17 when one person after another started to come forward questioning my co-author's account in very specific terms, making contrary statements on record that completely negated each other, attacks, some of them in terms of the wording extremely violent, on people who simply were citing the truth and then refusing to answer specific questions of mine regarding things that he had told me. And then my finding out that he had been making a living for the previous 20-odd years forging rock and roll memorabilia, and just as important, forging the provenance that would accompany the work, and learned how to work the system illegally and very well, in some cases very large and well-known auction houses. We have not been in touch for about 8 years in any manner, which is fine with me. And there is still a small clique of people that follow him, although so much has been published to completely show what a liar he is. Unfortunately, the main result of this in terms of my life as a writer and investigator was that the book I was most proud of is littered with exaggerations, confabulations, half-truths, truths, and has suffered greatly in reputation as a result. Once this information came to me, and I had to admit how wrong I had been for so long, I had to bring all of this information to the attention of our American publisher in New York City and say, my investigation shows that this is the result. You need to do your own investigation. And if you come up with the same results I have, then you have to do something that I really hate but needs to be done, which is this book has to go out of print. And that's exactly what happened. And that book has been out of print 8 years now, and will not be going back in. It hurts in that there is so much I am proud of in that book, hundreds of parts of it. There are several hundred annotated, researched, and confirmed footnotes, every one of which I stand by. My narrative is absolutely as true as it can be, except in the places where I believed and was misled by aspects of what I believed and was fed. As it stands right now, life goes on. I realized, there are only two ways you can handle something like this. There's a kind of Dick Cheney, my way or the highway. Real men don't admit they're wrong. You just hunker down and tough your way through it, because telling the truth is for sissies. And I spent more than a year following this. Every talk I gave, every interview I did on radio, every opportunity that people gave me to talk about this, to apologize, literally. And when I think of the list of well-known people I helped to mislead, I think of the list of the thousands of people that I don't know and will never meet, who took everything in that book seriously as a nonfiction account, which is just what it was billed as, not a nonfiction account informed by a fair amount of fiction.
What is the biggest lesson you learned from this entire experience when it comes to Left at Eastgate?
You termed it correctly, what I believe, because I don't know. At this point, I would say I do not believe his account of being taken underground and programmed and going through this fascinating stuff that he lays out in the book. If that happened, I think it happened to his roommate, who is one of the somewhat mysterious figures in this story, because he has been very careful never to give a full account. A gentleman named Adrian Bustinza, on the record, who made it clear to Larry that he was never going to talk about what he experienced or thought or believed he experienced. And that is another variable in this. Did certain aspects of this happen, or were they put into the heads of the individuals involved? I think Larry was in the Air Force. He was there at the time. He may well have had earlier UFO-related experiences. And I say this in great part because his late mother, a lovely woman who both Bud and I interviewed extensively, certainly maintained that she had been taken with clear memories of being inside a craft, etc. And this is a very proper Boston bred lady who is not prone to exaggerations, certainly not in the service of supporting anything her son had said. So there is that. Also, that Larry, the real modus operandi here, as far as I've been able to look back and put together, he really wanted to be a personality. He really wanted to be well known. He really wanted to be famous. And in his mind growing up, it was all around rock and roll. That didn't happen, in good part because he didn't have the musical chops to do it. And people say, well, why would anybody want to be famous for something like this? Well, if you want to be a public figure, the widgets that get you there are sometimes secondary. And this is what he chose to go with. And I was the person he chose to enroll in helping to sell that story, which is very different than what's happened with this situation with the British film production companies and Netflix, where there was the same intent to deceive, but not because they wanted to be famous for something, as much as that there was money to be made on this sensationalistic, bogus, absolutely outrageous type of presentation of what could have been an historic 3-part Netflix miniseries on the same UFO case. That's one of the things that drew me to it. What an opportunity. And of course, that didn't come to be.
Okay. I know that was long, guys. Thank you for bearing with us. But I wanted to show the impact this possible deception has had on my mentor and get his side of the story out while Larry is now at the forefront of the Capel Green Rendlesham case right now when it comes to this interview he did with Ross Coulthard in this and this subsequent documentary that's going to come out. What did Pat say there? I did miss that. Sorry. I'm glad you're showing this. People need to know.
People
Thanks.
need to see it. And you do. You need, in order to get a full view of what these things actually are as they roll out, you need to know these things, and you can make your own decision about whether you think it's true, it's false, or it's somewhere in the middle. I suspect it's somewhere in the middle.
I think you're right. You know, I think once it was found out that he had been less than honest and Peter cut ties. The book was taken out of publication, all that stuff. I was like, this guy made up everything. He lied about everything. Now I'm stuck, and that's ufology.
That's it.
Yeah.
Constantly in this wedge.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
You know, and I made this public on Patrick's show as well. To be fully transparent, my play that I was writing about Larry and Peter, everything was good. I had both of their blessings. I've been talking to them, and then out of the blue, I get the most crass and frankly unsettling message from Larry Warren, or who I believe is Larry Warren. This is the person I've been talking to for almost 2 years about the play, saying, if you continue writing this play, I'm not even gonna say. I have the
Wow.
evidence to back it up, but I felt threatened enough that I stopped working on the play. This was also the time where all of this had kind of imploded, and it was found out that he had forged things, he had lied about things, he had been caught doing fraudulent things outside of the UFO world as well. And meanwhile, you've got this whirlwind of all these people saying he was never even there, like this is BS, blah 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 blah, and it all came to a fever pitch, and I said, I can't continue
Can't
with
do
this
this.
play. Yeah,
No.
so
Well,
it
there's
was
no way to
heartbreaking.
clean it up in a way that you would ever be comfortable with. There may be a way now, Ryan, to rewrite it and insert some of what has gone
Mhm.
on and have a slightly different plot line. I don't know, but you might be borrowing trouble to do that.
I might, or yeah, it'll be the longest play in history. It's gonna reach like Henry VIII levels or something. But yeah, yeah. Thank you everyone for watching and going through this story with us. I don't know where I stand on Larry Warren. I change my mind all the time, but I think you're right. I think there is a strong possibility that he was there and he saw something. Um, Peter mentioned in that clip he was taken underground. Yeah, that's a whole other thing. Taken underground, threatened never to talk about this, was drugged, and it was like a truth serum to what did you see out there? Like, no, you didn't see that. All this. No one else has ever come forward and said that
Any of
happened
that.
to them. Yeah, nothing.
Mhm. Yeah.
No one else has claimed to have seen beings out there in the forest. No one else has claimed to have seen people setting up video cameras to record all this. So it all rests on the shoulders of one man. And with his
An
past,
uncomfortable place to be. It's an uncomfortable
consider
place.
the source, guys. Consider the source.